I will call the meeting to order. If everyone could stand and join, if they're able, and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, everybody, and welcome. First item on our agenda is public comment. Does anyone have anything not on tonight's agenda? Seeing no one, I will move on to reports from school committee members. Anybody? Mr. Oakley, go right ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I had a report on some research I did in between meetings, and I thought, myself included, we spent so much time talking about DESE and COVID numbers and masks that I fear that we're losing sight of the connection directly to the people we're trying to protect the most, which is the kids. I was honestly just deeply affected when the superintendent told us about the hospitalized kids last time, and because it felt like it was right here. It was happening here in Middleborough. And I had the opportunity to speak to the mother of a young girl here in Middleborough that became very sick with COVID. And with her permission, although I removed anything identifiable, I wanted to share her story because I think it's important for us to keep things like this front of mind when we discuss this stuff. So I'll just read what she wrote. And like I said, I removed anything identifiable from this. She writes, "On December 9th, my daughter came home from school with a fever, headache, and muscle aches. So my gut was to call our pediatrician. We were seen that night, and both girls were positive. We watched them closely at home over the weekend, and on Monday, my oldest started to get worse. Her oxygen was dipping too low for my comfort. Called the pediatrician again, and she advised us to go to the children's ER, and we did. And as soon as we got there, they triaged her, and within an hour, she went downhill fast. She was on oxygen, IVs, many different medicines. It was scary how fast she declined. Even with the support of the ER team, she was declining fast. Her blood pressure was extremely low, and things were looking bad. They were doing everything they could to save her. My little girl was fighting for her life. She was stable enough to be transferred to the ICU, but she was still in bad shape. She was on high-flow oxygen, and the next day they put her on the ventilator. She remained on the ventilator for 4 days. A lot of prayers and a lot of good medical interventions saved my daughter. She then went back to the high-flow oxygen and soon later went to regular flow, and she remained in the ICU for 7 days. She was discharged on her 12th birthday. Best birthday present ever to our family, besides the day she was born. We laid low for the rest of the week, and while she regained her strength, she went back to school on Monday after vacation, but felt ill the next day, and she's still not back to herself, but she's getting there. All in all, she had COVID primarily, then COVID pneumonia, septic shock, and developed viral pneumonia." So that's the end of the quote from this mom that I had the chance to talk to. And I just wanted to ask the members of this community and members of this committee that we all ask ourselves, how many kids are we willing to risk to achieve our comfort? Is it 1? Is it 3? Should be probably 0. With Omicron looking like it's heading in a positive direction, thank God, I think we need to do everything we can to keep our young people safe until this is over. Maintain compliance with infection control procedures, just like we have, hold each other accountable, and really just hold it together so we can say at the end of this, we did the best we could to limit serious illness and death in our kids. And the only difference, in my opinion, between now and the end of this pandemic is how many preventable things did we prevent. So that's it. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. O. Other members of the school committee? Seeing none, I will move on. Natalia, welcome,
Thank you.
and we'll have your report, Natalia.
So for this week at the MEC, they are plugging away despite the ongoing COVID issues. It has been a challenge for the teachers with so many absences, staff, and students. The question of whether or not to move on with their lessons with many students absent continues to come up, and teachers continue to be creative in how to manage this. Everyone is working so hard and being compassionate towards the students, their families, and each other. MKG is working hard to meet their goals for ST Math and Lexia. Their students and coaches are focused on improving their writing and word study. Staff and students are excited that the book fair is next week. Information regarding parent-teacher conferences that are scheduled for the week of February 28th will be coming out soon. And lastly, a special shout out to the ESPs at MKG that have been a huge help and support at MKG, especially over the past few weeks. For HBB, they are looking forward to getting their next round of after-school clubs up and running. Parents should expect to see sign-up sheets coming home in early February. They are also starting their new mindfulness program in grades 3 and 4 in February through their partnership with Calmer Choice. Students in grades 3 and 4 will participate in 16 sessions over 8 weeks, designed to teach skills to increase inner resilience, reduce the impact of stress, manage emotional responses, learn self-control, and increase their sense of well-being. They will be rolling this out to the other grades as they move forward and are looking forward to getting started. For Nichols Middle School, the next GSA meeting will be held with Mrs. Foley on Monday, February 14th at 2:45 in the cafeteria. All are welcome to attend. The NMS Drama Club is planning to resume its play schedule for this spring. The first meeting for all interested students will be on February 2nd in the school auditorium. Starting tomorrow, Nichols Middle School will have Flannel Fridays through February. Lastly, a congratulations to Matt Patterson, an 8th grade student on the high school wrestling team who has had an unbelievable season representing the Sachems and NMS. He won last night in his varsity match against his opponent from Belmont and placed 3rd at the Weymouth Invitational Tournament last weekend. We wish him and the entire team the best of luck this weekend in Cohasset. And for MHS, we want to congratulate the MHS music program for an outstanding job with the holiday concert last week. Final exams will be taking place next Thursday, January 25th, and Wednesday, the 26th. There will be an 11 a.m. dismissal on Wednesday. The following clubs will be taking place on Wednesday at 2 p.m. Key Club in room C149, GSA in room C158, and Yes Club in room C159. And lastly, the members of National Honor Society are offering a program to all students in all classes, allowing for weekly meetings with a one-on-one tutor. This is a free tutoring opportunity, and please reach out to Mr. Goldman if you are interested. Thank you.
Natalia? Does anyone have any questions for Natalia? Thank you very much, Natalia. We appreciate it.
No problem.
Thank you.
I'll turn it over to the superintendent's report.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee, members of the audience tonight. My first update is giving you some updates. I've tried to provide you updates on our COVID-19 active COVID positive cases. Luckily, and Mr. Oakley alluded to it a little bit, we are trending downward significantly, which is good. When I say significantly, I mean on January 7th, we were at 139 positive cases in the district. On January 14th, we were at 76 positive cases in the district as of last Friday. And as of today, we are down to 47.
Awesome.
So down to 47 from 139 2 weeks ago, which is significant. What plays into that a little bit is the new CDC 5-day. So we have more students back in school quicker. But we have not had a good deal of school spread, as we know. And we are fortunate that our numbers are trending significantly down, and hopefully they'll continue to go down. And that's as of today. Tomorrow, that number on the dashboard may change. It may go up slightly, it may go down. So that is as of today, that 47 number is as of today. So that is the sort of the numbers that we have, the trending numbers that we have. Tonight we also have, and I see that Mrs. Magnasco has buzzed in, and I know she was just slightly delayed. But we have on Tuesday morning, the commissioner called a meeting, called superintendents, and we were on a call, and he informed us that the state was going to go in a different direction and was going to strongly recommend that school systems adopt the new program, the new testing program option, and leave test and stay, and get away from test and stay. What we have, and I actually called the assistant to the commissioner to clarify, is if you have pooled testing and symptomatic testing in place as a district, you can go directly to this new program. If you don't have those things, then you need to adopt either pooled testing or you need to adopt symptomatic testing. But they have also offered that they would provide state help. And the CIC nurses that we've had who've helped us out with test and stay might be available, and we're trying to confirm that, might be available to help us. The symptomatic testing is an overload for our nurses, our day-to-day nurses who continue to administer medications and the day-to-day operation of each school health room. And this would be too much for them to do, so we'd need outside help, whether it be through a grant that we've received recently, through the work of Paula Magnasco and working with the State Department, trying to get some more money in the district, bringing in our own help, or getting the help from the state through the testing program, the nurses that were hired to do the test and stay, who might be available again to do the symptomatic testing. We would probably, at some point, get into more details about what that looks like in our district, but there are some time constraints with this, and I just wanted to let you know what this is all about. And Paula, if you're ready to go. Paula is going to introduce sort of basically, it's about a 5 or 6 page memo that came from the commissioner that was pretty comprehensive. It came from the commissioner and Margaret Cook, the acting commissioner of the Department of Public Health. It was a joint document that came out to us. Again, it arrived on Tuesday. So we've had a chance to sort of go through it, dissect it, read it several times. There was a webinar yesterday that Russell Johnson from DEAS provided about how the program and what this new program would look like and why they moved to it. And Paula's going to talk about some of those details right now. Ms.
Thank you.
Magnesco, welcome.
Thank you, Superintendent Lynch. Good evening, everyone.
Paula, if you could put that microphone a little closer to you, thank you.
Sure. I've never been called quiet. Is that good?
Yeah.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. As Superintendent Lynch explained, this is a summary of recent information that was provided to us in a joint guidance from the Department of Education and the Department of Public Health. It was released on January 18th, and it's 6 pages, but I boiled it down to, I think, 16 slides, and we will go through them. Again, as Superintendent Lynch said, it's Commissioner Riley from the Mass Department of Elementary Education and Secondary Education, sometimes referred to as DESE or DEAS, and Margaret Cook is our acting commissioner of the Massachusetts Department of Public Health. And what came in this new guidance is that the Department of Education and the Department of Public Health extended an appreciation to all schools in Massachusetts. They recognized our ongoing efforts to keep schools open and safe for our students. DESE DPH also recognized that schools have been diligent about implementing key COVID-19 mitigation strategies, such as vaccinations, mask wearing, and testing. And they commended the schools for, as they said, you and for your hard work. And by that you, they meant the people in our schools. And looking ahead, a direct quote from the same guidance from Commissioner Riley and Margaret Cook. The quote says, "We have now had the opportunity to review available data about our testing programs and to share timely information from those data. And as a result, they offer an updated set of COVID testing options, including a weekly at-home test for participating staff and students to optimize in-school learning." When we listened to the webinar yesterday, it was nice to hear the data that these decisions weren't made just based on feelings, but they looked at the data and the results of what's come from, I think, the 13 weeks we had test and stay in the schools. So to continue that summary and the data, they looked at over 2,000 schools in the state that participated in the current testing program. For example, as Superintendent Lynch, there's the 3 options at this time: symptomatic testing, pooled testing, and the test and stay option, which is what Middleborough Public Schools has. If anybody doesn't know what the difference between the 3 are, the symptomatic testing is for students that develop symptoms. It's exactly what it sounds like. It's a diagnostic tool to determine whether or not a person is COVID positive or not. It could be a staff or a student, and it would be opted in. The pooled testing is also, all 3 of them are opt-in or opt-out. The pooled testing is a little different. I wouldn't say I've heard as many positive things about the pooled testing. The pooled testing would be a group of, say, 6 students or 30 students. I've heard different sizes, but they're tested individually, but their results go into a pool, and with one reagent, they get the results from that pool. And unfortunately, if one student, or if it was a staff, tested negative, the whole group would have to leave school, retest, and determine which person caused the group to test negative. And if they couldn't find that person, it's an even greater delay. So to me, it's not optimal time on learning. It's lost school for healthy people. So that's the pooled testing. We didn't elect to do pooled testing or symptomatic testing the first time around. In the fall, we reviewed these things, and I think at that time, test and stay was a good match. So when they looked at the overwhelming data, DESE and DPH decided that schools are safe environments for teaching and learning from what they've gathered. This report came out on January 18th, so when they looked at the week prior to this report, the data demonstrated that despite elevated K-12 positivity, we all know the numbers were on a sharp incline at that time, the estimated individual positivity rate was still at only, on average, 1/5 of the statewide positivity rate. The quote continues that the state-compiled data test and stay program shows evidence of strength about school safety. As of January 9th, there were 503,312 test and stays that had been conducted. 496,440 of them were negative. This equals a 98.6% negativity rate. The guidance from 11822 continues. When they looked at a pre-publication study of the first 13 weeks of test and stay, the program across all participating Massachusetts schools found that the secondary transmission rate was 2.9%, and that the tertiary transmission rate was very low. The quote continues, we, the Massachusetts Department of Education and Public Health, are committed to using data to inform our recommendations to districts and schools. It was emphasized, it's bold in the original document and it's underlined, so I copied. As demonstrated above, test positivity rates and test and stay indicate that individuals identified as close contacts in school are very unlikely to contract and spread COVID-19. The guidance continues, therefore extensive contact tracing and the associated test and stay procedures are not adding significant value as a mitigation strategy, despite the demand they place on the time of school health staff and school staff at large. As a result, we, the Massachusetts Department of Education and the Department of Public Health, are recommending that school health personnel increase their focus on identifying symptomatic individuals rather than monitoring in-school close contacts who are unlikely to contract or spread the virus. The Massachusetts Department of Ed report, along with the DPH report from the test and stay program data, the points from the guidance from January 18th continues with an explanation of the Massachusetts DPH and DESE recommendation for a shift in testing focus. They're recommending we shift away from test and stay and move towards what is now supporting a shift to a new set of testing options that includes, and I'll include the word optional, weekly at-home testing for participating staff and students. And we've asked clarification on that. Any of the programs that we could add would be optional, and it would be separate opt-ins, and I can answer any clarification on that after. Again, the Massachusetts Department of Education and the Department of Public Health has emphasized the new options they've recommended districts offer are for the families and staff. Again, it's an opt-in. Just like test and stay was a consensual agreement, if we were to add symptomatic testing, it would have the same opt-in, separate from the possibility of students and staff being able to test at home. So it continues, the Massachusetts DESE DPH guidance from 118 says the new set of testing options described below, which include a weekly at-home test for participating staff, there's that participating word, it means you opt in, and students will uniquely support the shift in focus toward identifying symptomatic individuals. The guidance continues that specifically districts and schools participating in the symptomatic and/or the pooled testing may choose to continue one or both of those testing strategies. At this time, Middleborough Public Schools is not in the symptomatic or pooled testing option, or may add one of the two. So we could add symptomatic or pooled or both. And through making these updates, may discontinue contact tracing and test and stay. And there's a footnote there. This is from page 2 of the 6-page document that was released on 1/18/22. And the third footnote says clearly, using their professional discretion, school health professionals, which is our school nurses, may determine if specific situations warrant close contact tracing. So on the webinar many of us were on yesterday, it was clarified that if there were reason and there was a pocket of spread, even had you no longer close contact tracing, we're all very well versed in it, for doing it for years now, it could be done still. And that again would be at the discretion of the school nurse, who of course would consult with school administration as needed, and our local public health. So the Mass DPH DESE guidance continues, and I directly quote, as an additional resource, districts and schools that elect to make this change will be provided with rapid antigen at-home tests for all participating staff and students that select to opt in, and it can be used on a weekly basis. The quotes continue that the Department of Public Health and the Department of Education recommend that districts and schools select this new option, and if they choose to implement it, they must notify their local Board of Health. And I apologize, it looks like I opened my unedited version. There's a typo there. When I replaced DESE DPH, it repeated. So forgive me, there's a newer version, but I won't bore you with pulling up my better edited version. So it continues with the note that the local the Middleborough Department of Public Health has been consulted. They've reviewed this information and have expressed support for these updates to testing options in Middleborough Public Schools. They too see the value in moving away from a program like Test and Stay, which really drains resources between staff, classroom staff, administration, nursing staff significantly, and moving back towards something where nurses are identifying students that are symptomatic and can benefit from personal care. So a return to the direct quote from the Mass DPH, and again, my apologies, this is not the edited version. Please note that this new option is only available to districts and schools that continue or start symptomatic and/or pooled testing. Districts and schools that choose to maintain test and stay will continue to close contact trace and will not be eligible to receive the rapid antigen at-home tests that's available and fully funded by this program for all students and staff that opt to partake. A reminder that the close contact tracing in schools has produced an observable drain on school resources, one that the Massachusetts Department of Education and Department of Public Health acknowledges. Mass DC Department of Ed and DPH presents data to support test and stay is no longer valuable in these rapidly updating times. So I've taken the direct quotes and kind of formatted a Q&A just to fit our format here tonight. But the question is, will the support from the MPS testing program continue? And from the DESE DPH guidance, the quote is, as a continuation of this contract with the state, CIC will continue to provide staffing and logistical support for the testing program, for both the original program, for those that have symptomatic testing and our pooled testing already in place, and for any new option, including program coordination and on-site specimen collectors as needed. At this time, Middleborough Public Schools does have a program coordinator off-site and does have specimen collectors in the form of nurses on hand to do the test and stay. So it would be natural that they would transition if Middleborough Public School were to select to do so. CIC will also continue to manage consent and reporting process, and that's a very helpful part in the program. As I said, right now they can only do 2 functions, so having them continue to partake so that the nurses and school staff and administration are not significantly drained is a plus. So an important clarification is the Massachusetts Department of Education and Public Health has advised through the follow-up webinars that we've partaken in, on the topic of testing in schools that CIC support teams, like the ones Middleborough Public Schools has developed a relationship with, will continue to be provided, and CIC is able to update their support staff from test and stay to symptomatic testing program as Mass DESE has advised, and DPH. So the next question would be, where do we go from here? What's a timeline? The Massachusetts Department of Education and Department of Public Health, and I can't remember the anagram for the Environmental Operations of Health and Human Services, I believe, Division of Department of Public Health, will continue to evaluate the COVID testing services we are offering throughout the remainder of the winter and early spring. The updated options will remain in place from January 31st to April 22nd, and I believe at that time everything will be reevaluated again. And I hope they continue to look at data and make evidence-based recommendations. We, and then this was the Mass Department of Public Health and Department of Education, will determine if any updates to the program are needed beyond April 22nd and provide you with more on that in early spring. I imagine it all could be discontinued too, if that were the way the data pointed. The Massachusetts Department of Education and DPH's guidance on the new at-home testing timeline. Again, the way this works right now is that the at-home antigen testing that districts and schools can elect to switch to, the updated testing program would roll out between tomorrow and April 1st. And again, this is something that the district can offer, and only those who want to opt in would receive the free at-home test kits. Those districts that respond affirmatively that they will accept this offering to the community by tomorrow, January 21st, will be prioritized to start the updated tested program. That at-home antigen testing program will be provided on a staggered basis with delivery of test kits for staff and students occurring on alternating weeks. And we've asked for clarification on this, and that CIC support staff that is in place now at Middleborough Public Schools would be able to support the distribution of these free at-home kits. So Massachusetts Department of Education and the Department of Public Health described it as an automatic at-home test kit delivery every other week to the district. They wouldn't be delivered to the homes of those that opt in. They'd be distributed, the plan would be by the CIC support staff every other week to those that select to participate. Districts that respond by January 21st will begin receiving tests for staff during the week of January 24th and for students during the week of January 31st. So I imagine they set this short timeline, and again, I shouldn't imagine, but it's so that they can figure out where everything goes first, and people that make their decisions later will fall later. The next question is, if the district selects to update and follow the new guidance, will it be optional for students and staff to participate in both symptomatic testing and the at-home testing? And the answer is yes to both. Both will be completely optional testing offered to all students and staff. No one is required to participate in any testing. And I'll reinforce that the test and stay program that we've had in place, I believe, for about 13 weeks now, it's all been optional. Superintendent Lynch and I reviewed that there were 3 safeguards we had in place with Middleborough Public Schools. Not only the phone call home to parents to talk about what the options were and to get a verbal feel for what parents had decided, but also we sent emails with the options and asked parents to reply to the emails with their choice of opting in or opting out. And then there was the 3rd safeguard, which is the online enrollment option, which you're all familiar with the link on the CIC guidance. Clearly for test and stay, anyone could opt out, and that will be the same for these 2 new programs. So the guidance from January 18th continues from the Department of Public Health and the Department of Education, and it's a direct quote that districts and schools that select the updated testing program will receive at-home antigen tests for all staff members who choose to participate, and for all students whose parents, guardians, caregivers signify interest in participating by completing a brief opt-in form. Massachusetts Department of Education and DPH will provide an optimal testing opt-in form for this purpose. So that's kind of a wording quote, but what it means is, as I've said earlier, there's two parts to this program: at-home testing and symptomatic testing. Parents would opt in or opt out individually. So could they opt in to the at-home testing but opt out to the symptomatic testing? Yes. Could they opt in to the symptomatic testing and out of the test at home? Yes. Could they opt in to both and opt out of both? Yes. So it's kind of a mix and match, but the way you'd opt in is completely separate, so it makes sure that there's no mix-up of the two. The next question is, for those that choose to participate, does vaccination status matter? And the answer is no. The Massachusetts Department of Education and DESE and Department of Public Health, quote, schools and districts can distribute at-home tests to all participating staff and students regardless of vaccination status. The next question is, how many kits will those that choose to participate in the at-home testing receive? And the answer is the at-home tests are packaged in kits containing 2 tests per kit. Participating staff and students will receive 1 kit every 2 weeks so that they can test themselves weekly. The next question is, what type of support comes with this fully funded program? And the answer is districts and schools that select the updated testing program will receive the materials and supports, including necessary translations they need to launch at-home tests. And here's a list of what it includes: templates and letters to staff, optional templates and letters and forms for opting in. It's excellent that it offers training material and positive test result notification, training for the at-home test, both video and paper. There'll be test distribution tracking sheets for districts, and I've also heard it could be done online. Test result response forms to report positive results to schools. Updated CIC ordering form for at-home tests. And I will say that because Middleborough Public Schools has been successfully implementing the Test and Stay program, much of this will not be new. These are things that are already in place within Middleborough Public Schools. The nurses are comfortable with it, the CIC staff are comfortable with it, and the community of parents, families, and staff have been familiar with these forms and the online options. So directly again from that same guidance on January 18th, update to quarantine guidelines as stated above, districts and schools that select the new testing program will discontinue individualized contact tracing. As such, for these districts and schools, there is no longer the expectation that close contacts will be identified, and therefore any potential contacts do not need to quarantine. Instead, schools should shift their focus to monitoring symptomatic individuals. Massachusetts Department of Education and the Department of Public Health will soon update the protocols for responding to COVID-19 scenarios with guidance to reflect these changes. I believe this is my last slide, and I think there's a lot of information on here. This is taken directly from that 6-page guidance released January 18th. It talks about the summary of next steps, gives us some dates when things will happen. Again, we talked about the second to last bullet, that if we, as a district, select to opt into the updates, that on January 24th, the district will begin to receive test kits for those participating staff that select to opt in, and students that select to opt in will begin to get tested the week of January 31st. After January 31st, districts will order additional at-home tests on an as-needed basis using the CIC ordering portal. And the way CIC has this managed right now with Test and Stay is there is an off-site remote coordinator that orders the supplies. So that reminder from DESE DPH, vaccines continue to be the best way to protect our residents against effects of COVID. DESE DPH asks us to please encourage students and staff to get vaccinated. We, DESE DPH, strongly encourage districts and schools to host mobile vaccination clinics to continue to provide access to vaccine and boosters for staff and students. And in conclusion, the Department of Education and Department of Public Health began our statewide testing services in the fall of 2020 with mobile testing clinics and symptomatic testing. Always looking to strengthen our response and reports, we, the Massachusetts Department of Education and Department of Public Health, added routine pool testing about 1 year ago during the summer of 2021, and we introduced Test and Stay. A strength of our statewide approach is its adaptability to meet the needs of our school base upon their current conditions. We, the Massachusetts Department of Education and the Department of Public Health, have now adapted our program to further optimize in-person learning. We look forward to your feedback as we implement this new program. Thank you.
Thank you, Paula. Are there any questions from the school committee for Paula?
Mr. Chair? Yeah, Ms. Magnesco, thank you. Regarding symptoms, I'd like to know exactly who would be, I understand that a nurse would be looking at a child and saying, okay, you have some symptoms. What would they specifically be looking for in order to determine whether that child would be, accepted for a test, whether they'd be making a phone call? And I do have a second part to that question after you answer this part.
Sure, there's a lot of things, and thankfully, that's a great question. Make sure I answer it fully because it is a good question and there's a couple different parts in there. But a lot of the decisions about how the symptomatic testing will look specifically in our schools would be decided after tomorrow. But I assure you that nothing would change in that it would meet a nursing assessment that requires a student to, up until now, be dismissed and be tested. Certain children present with symptoms that could be COVID, like a headache, but we go, through our assessment, we assess hydration and offer water, and the child waits 5 minutes, drinks the water, and they're back to class. That student would not be referred for testing. And I know you know the Stay Well guidance that we're familiar with, where some symptoms are emboldened and some are not, such as shortness of breath. It would reach a certain nursing parameter in which that student would be dismissed otherwise. And, depending on how this unfolds for Middleborough Public Schools, there are options that it could be an on-site, that the parent dismisses the student and they go to a site in Middleborough Public Schools, and it's like the CIC staff come from parking lot tests. It could be something like that, where the only tests would be done with parents present, and of course with their consent. So those are things that when a guidance comes out on Thursday and we sit here, on the 18th, and we sit here on the 20th ready to wrap our heads around it, I respect that we will carefully consider everything and with proper due diligence make the right decision for Middleborough Public Schools. Did I answer your question?
You did. So now my second part of the question would be, say a student had COVID in December, would we be honoring that 90-day kind of 3-month window that has been typically honored regarding a positive test? So,
well, if we clarify the 90-day, don't let me, you want to finish this question before I answer?
yeah, no, I just want to, I want to know if you determine as a nurse, if the school nurse determines, okay, this child definitely ticks off 2 or 3 boxes that would necessarily normally require a COVID test to return to school, but that child had COVID 3 weeks ago, what's that going to look like?
I think we're mixing our guidelines, and it's very common because all these guidelines look alike, and as the steps are making them more similar, instead of 5 days, 7 days, 14 days, 11 days, they're now kind of a 5-day, 10-day. So it's natural that you'd kind of apply what we applied in the past. We applied the vaccination status and the exclusion for natural immunity. The 90-day exclusion was to prevent people from having to quarantine. So there is no quarantine anymore. We're not doing close contact tracing. So they're really, the natural immunity, it's nice to recognize, but if we see someone with symptoms and we know that there are people that have had COVID or Delta in 90 days, we'd still say to parents, there is an option to test if you'd like. Your child probably needs to go home and they need to seek medical guidance. If you can't get a test, I'd like you to know there's testing here in Middleborough Public Schools, just like we had with the fire department. So it's a weird way to answer your question because I know that I want to make sure we're on the same platform for when natural immunity came into play, and that was more that students that had natural immunity did not have to participate in test and stay or quarantine at home, and we will no longer be doing that, unless we see something that triggers us to say we should be doing that.
Okay, so to clarify, if that did happen and you did say your child should go home because they're sick, which is fine, any parent should be doing that.
Yep.
Will they be denied access back to school if they do not test?
That's gone too.
Yeah.
So that is, I guess, if a child is sick and at home, it's now a parent attestation, which is very different from what we're talking about now, but it's a parent attestation of wellness based on the criteria that changed in the guidance from December 30th.
Okay.
So there is no more required a test to come back to school. There's no longer a need to have a letter of clearance. It's up to the schools. If an absence was greater than 5 days, would they require a medically documented note to say that this was a medically excused absence? But that note can come in at any time.
Okay.
Sometimes in the spring, people go, ooh, I forgot to, submit that medical absence note for that strep or the mono my child had. So that doesn't change. I think these are reasonable changes, and, I can answer any part of your question more if helpful, but I hope that info helped. And is this giving feedback? Because is there something I can do to talk better?
No, this was great, thank
Okay.
you.
Thank you.
I did also have a few questions that were sent to me, Mr. Chair, if that's okay. I did promise that I would ask some questions from some members of the community. So the question came from a parent. I know we don't do pool testing, but do we participate in symptomatic testing, which you've clarified tonight, we do not.
At this
So
time,
that
no.
would be in school, we don't test symptomatic kids. So if we decide to join the symptomatic testing only, then parents can say yes to the test at school or at home. They could say, I'm just going to come get my kid and test them at home. They don't have to opt in. Okay.
Yep, nope. And, you could opt in for, like, let's just say it's my child, and, my child, and I have to come dismiss my child in, let's say, February, and my child presents a extensive amount of symptoms. I say, my goodness, I can't get a test at my pediatrician.
Right.
Yes, I will test through the Middleborough Public Schools option. But then come March, my child presents a different set of symptoms, and they say, you could test if you want, but I'm like, no, I know
Yeah.
what this is, and I know my child's going to be better in a day.
Right.
I don't need to test. So that, that's how nursing goes, and it's based on what's in front of us.
Okay, great. And the last one was regarding vaccine status, but that was also answered, so this is helpful. Thank you very much.
Yay. I thought it was helpful, too, that they
Thank you.
clarified that right
Yep.
in the slides for us, which is why we included everything in that announcement, because there was a lot of great info in there.
Thank you.
My pleasure, thank you.
Mr. Ogle, go ahead. Sure.
Thank you very much. That was a much easier listen than the 6-page document that it came from. I like it. It seems like it would actually increase the testing that's happening right now, which seems like it can't possibly be a bad thing. And hey, I promise there's a question at the end of this, but hey, maybe Dusty listened to us after all with the whole vaccinated versus unvaccinated, even though they didn't respond, or they did respond, but not to that. So hey, that's great. My question to you is, it sounds good to me. It sounds like more testing and more convenient for families and less time lost for kids in school. From your perspective, is this an upgrade or a downgrade for infection control?
First of all, I would say I would never, as a nurse, say that I want to do more testing. I would say it's thoughtful testing.
Right.
And it's thoughtful testing based on symptoms, which is what I've longed to do, and I've longed for the nurses to be freed up to do so. Thoughtful testing based on what presents to us as opposed to where people sat. So I think that was an awesome, like you say, advancement in DESE DPH's decision and what they're offering, and I'm glad they looked at data before they made the decision. You asked my personal opinion, and I have lost sleep over this. I've got up. I don't usually turn the light on and turn the computer on in the middle of the night, but with this I have, because I thought we certainly want to do the right thing for the students and staff and the whole community. So win-win came to me, but I thought, what's the win when we're still dealing with a pandemic? But it just, to me, seems like a strident move in the right direction.
Excellent. I just had a follow-up question, and Mr. Superintendent, please feel free to, if this is more of a you question, it seems to suggest in that letter that, and I might be wrong on this, that the longer you wait to opt into this, the further back on the list you are. And if I'm reading it right in your presentation, it seems like we have to submit opt-in forms by January 28th to DESE or to the state in some way, so 8 days. Do we feel like that's enough time?
I don't believe I read it that way. I will reread it.
I think it was Feb. 1.
Yeah, the important piece of being in the early rollout for the tests for those that want them at home is for the district superintendent, Mr. Lynch, to complete a brief survey online of what decision has been made. The webinar we attended yesterday said there will be time, like we have said, to unpack how this will look in our district. But the important timeline and where we would move further and further down the list is anyone who expresses interest after tomorrow.
Got it. Mr. Chair, just a clarification. I'm reading, by January 28th, districts will collect opt-in forms from interested families. It says that in that 6-page. But I would fully support this. It seems like it's a good decision.
And am I correct? I don't have that right in front of me, and it's not memorized, but if we can opt in or opt out any time, they're kind of making an arbitrary, we should submit whoever's interested up front, but people can join later.
Great.
You know what I'm saying?
Yep.
It wouldn't be like, everybody has to fill this out. I don't believe. I think that it's just, you show your initial interest by that timeline.
Great. Oh, and sorry, I had one more question, but I don't want to monopolize. Anyone else? Okay. There was a mention in that letter, I think, or maybe it was in the website that letter linked to on DESE's page, about how you would do this. Is there a particular day of the week that we would just say today's testing day? Do you know what would that look like?
Well, there's two pieces to this. So I think you're referring to the at-home.
Yes.
And yes, the district could come up with a plan for what day of the week works well. I'd ask that it not be Sunday, because then they'll roll into me. My family likes me on Sundays. I hope everybody's laughing, because Mondays seems to make sense. But will it be like, if you went to the movies on Monday night and you forgot to test, we're going to come find you and make sure you test? I don't believe so. I believe it will still be anyone who opted in, would like to test on whatever day the district chooses, and the results would come. I don't know that anybody reports anything but positivity, so I don't even know that we'd know how many people tested on that night, but we'd know how many were positive.
Okay. I think that's all I
But
have.
students who are symptomatic in school
Oh,
would be
right.
tested immediately.
Thank you, Superintendent Lynch. Yes, the separate program being the symptomatic testing is as it's named, and that would be ongoing throughout the week, and the times of it would coincide with our different school start and end times, and the location would fit wherever Middleborough Public Schools feels is best for Middleborough Public Schools.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Other questions?
We have a question online, so I'm just going to read what they wrote. They said, my question is, if a parent chooses to opt out of testing and a child gets sent home due to illness, are they allowed to return as long as they are fever-free for 24 hours?
They would follow the same guidance that's on the Health Services page now. I think it's with my email bump back to. I updated it last night and tried to get all the typos out of it, but it follows, as Jacqueline Johnson with our local Middleborough Department of Public Health's guidance came out yesterday, when we're getting all these guidance. Why not change another big thing? But you can see the criteria is, I think, best described as a parent-caregiver attestation of well, like we used to do with flu and strep, fever-free for 24 hours without Tylenol and Advil. Symptoms well. I will miss that medical local public health nurse assessment, because it's a lot of decisions to be made if there's a lot of discharge or congestion behind a mask to come to school. I also don't know if someone should come back at day 5 if they're recovered and they're still coughing. That's a lot of discomfort with the mask. So, if a parent were to say, my child's recovered and hasn't had a fever for 24 hours, but I'm going to keep them out 2 more days, we get that. So I'm sorry if I veered off from your question.
That's okay. And then I'm just going to add a little more to it. So they also said, so potentially they're back in school 2 days later and could be COVID positive, while parents who opt in and verify COVID positive status are now out of school for 5 days. So their fear is that there will be little acceptance in this and potentially a lot of COVID positive staff and students in school. So I just want to see if they're understanding
I
that.
think we're going to have to unpack that really slowly, because I'll say I don't have it in writing in front of me, but we have to separate the guidance that changed, that's protocols have changed, separate from this decision that has to be made tonight. If you could read that again, because it makes some assumptions that I'm not sure I'm following.
Yeah, sure. I think they're just asking for their own clarification. They just want to understand it. So they said they could potentially be back in school 2 days later and could be COVID positive, while parents who opt in and verify COVID positive status are now out of school for 5 days.
Again, those that test positive for COVID follow the same guidance, whether it's through symptomatic testing or their own at-home testing that they bought at Walgreens or CVS. So that really doesn't change this. The first part of what you said about back in 2 days, my first instinct is, you know, we don't know. I guess I feel I come from a place where I'm not going to judge, but we need to live in a world where everyone could be COVID positive. If there is a prodromal phase that people could have spread, the possibility to spread without symptoms, how can we judge someone that feels their student is well to go back to school? And this is why there's a great advantage of your nurses and your administrators and your teachers not being bogged down with rulers and seating charts and notifications to home about who sat where and where did they sit on the bench during basketball, but instead are looking at kids. And I've been doing this long enough that you as parents and I as a nurse know you can tell that glassy-eyed, rosy-cheeked look that is, oh boy, something's brewing there, more so than where the child sat. So by doing these changes, it will free your school nurse up to be better available and to have those well conversations and those conversations where we're trying to get everyone well and offer the proper supports and referrals as needed. So should a student come back too early, and too early could be day 6 for a kid that maybe have a more extensive illness, or like I said, more nasal drainage, and you know that nurse could say maybe a couple more days at home. You know, your child's really struggling behind that mask, and they may have seemed well this morning, but as this day goes on, they're tired. And you know, my professional judgment, the school nurse could say, is that that child should go home. So I think one of the deep advantages of moving away from test and stay frees your nurses up to do these things, which is provide optimal, comprehensive school health services as needed.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Other questions? Does anyone in the audience have questions?
Is this on? This definitely, symptomatic testing has been the only thing that ever made sense to me. To test somebody who's not symptomatic is never made a lot of sense to me. So this definitely seems like a move in the right direction. The thing I don't understand, it does sound like you can choose to do both symptomatic and pooled. You don't have to do both, right? You can choose one or the other.
Yeah.
And I don't understand pooled. I don't understand the benefit of it or what it even serves, what purpose it serves whatsoever.
Yeah, I have not put forward pooled. I thought I was very clear that there were downsides to pooled. And if it's and/or, symptomatic makes sense. Pooled is another drain on resources, if you ask me, that provides little benefit. But that's just based on the research I've done. I'm not just saying that based on my own opinion.
That's my understanding of pooled too. It doesn't, I'm like, is it just for them to understand data? It doesn't offer us any benefit, doesn't help you with decision-making. This sounds like it's allowing us to go back to the nurse's assessment of symptomatic student and whether a student looks well or not well. So if they are not well to be in school, you're going to send them home regardless of whether they test positive, test negative, they're not well, your criteria and your subjective assessment is going to be the thing that sends them home. So if they're unwell and you test them at school and they're negative, you're not going to keep them, is my understanding. This isn't going to be
Correct.
like a way that you stay. If you're sick,
No.
you're going home.
And that was why we didn't sign up for symptomatic testing in the beginning, because it was the consensus that, well, this doesn't make sense because they're still sick, and just because they didn't test positive for COVID,
Right.
we've still got sick kids in the school. So we're going to design this in a way to avoid that.
Right.
And we would promise you, our nurse staff is amazing, and we will meet as many times as it takes to make sure everybody understands the parameters for dismissal for illness, and that parent has an option to choose to test or not to test. So the dismissal and the recovery are still at the same trajectory, and it's a parent caregiver choice whether or not to test.
And it sounds like to me, you now have some flexibility in which, where you would say, like, my assessment is that the child has a headache and it's very likely just some dehydration and they're feeling a little better. But if the parent felt more comfortable with you testing them, you could do that. And if they, you could determine if that made them feel better. You're still
Go
basically.
because not every child that comes with a headache gets a parent phone call, because sometimes it's just
Oh, okay.
stress over a test,
Okay. But I'm
and
saying,
you-
for
so-
somebody that would be, you could, opt to do that or make that determination if you had that sense about a particular parent or whatever it was.
And so, yes, individualized care is where we're moving back towards, instead of applying a protocol and a seating chart.
That is wonderful. I think that sounds excellent. Symptomatic testing definitely makes more sense. And I think that the number of days that everybody's been hyper-focused on has been problematic, because for some people, this kind of goes through them in a very short window of time, maybe 24 hours. For some, it could be 10 days. For some, it's very severe. You could have comorbidities, or you could have no comorbidities and still have that wild card in which you get a severe illness. So it's very unknown. We can't predict everything. So to withhold a child who gets it through it in 24 hours, I always lean on keeping them home a little bit longer, because I feel like they need that extra day to just, for them to be
Strength.
well,
Yep.
even though their symptoms are gone, for them to feel well. But everybody's going to make a different decision. But to withhold somebody longer than they absolutely need to be, and going back to, I guess what we've done historically seems to
Personalized
make
care.
seems to make sense. And now there's the flexibility of having tests available for families that want it. That
That
sounds,
want
I don't know, that sounds
Just
good
one
to
of
me.
the parameters that you were describing also too, that we've all struggled with, was the child that unfortunately tests positive and says to us, but I feel so good and I feel
Yeah.
fine. They
Yeah.
may have recovered from COVID weeks past and we didn't catch it, and they had to
Right.
stay home for 10
Right.
days. That was a heartbreak.
Right.
But we do what we can to keep the schools safe, so.
And that continuous testing is problematic too, because we've known in healthcare that we've had patients that continuously test positive over and over and over, even though they've cleared, their symptoms. We actually had a patient whose adult granddaughter was fired from her job because she could not get a negative test to go back to work. So sometimes testing is, it's not really valuable, and it can be detrimental.
There's
So-
new information. One test, PCR or antigen, is better at catching the negative test on a recovered, but I don't have it in front of me, but it looks like they're better understanding how
That's
that can
good.
work now, so. Through all of this, we're gaining a lot of information.
Right, but yet, like you said, like somebody who may have had a previous infection that tests positive, but they're not unwell, you would be erroneously withholding them from school, and, so.
We're not
okay,
doing
this
that
is-
anymore.
This is great. Well, glad to see Desi's moving in the right direction. Thanks.
Any other questions?
I don't know if there's any other questions from the audience?
Good evening, Mr. Chair. Thank you for the presentation, and kudos to your nurses for everything they're going through. I'm in the COVID still. I just wanted to quickly ask a question. On November 18th, the board discussed near the end of that meeting, in fact, it was described as a really great idea, about a subcommittee meeting of members from that subcommittee, the COVID, Mr. Stevens talked about a COVID subcommittee that would work with parents such as the previous speaker. And I was looking through the agendas, and it appears either I missed it, or maybe we haven't had the meeting yet.
No, we haven't had a meeting yet.
Is there plans to continue that, or?
Well, so much happened since then with the letter from the DESE and the new conditions and everything happened like that. I offered, no parent reached out to me. So if a parent still wants to have a meeting, I'm willing to, but it seemed like things progressed beyond that.
Thank you, Mr.
So
Chair.
if somebody wants to have a meeting, I'm still open for it.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay.
Go right ahead.
If there are no further questions, I would thank Paula Magnasco
Thank you, Paul.
very much. Appreciate it. Always, for you and the entire nursing staff of the Middleborough Public Schools, how hard you work, and this has been a difficult time at best, and we thank you for everything you do and everything your crew does. Next up on the agenda for me, Mr. Brannigan, Mr. Paul Brannigan from the high school, in our annual January Middleborough High School Program of Studies presentation, which would include any changes from this year and a summary of the program of studies. So we welcome Mr. Brannigan here tonight. Going to be a little transition time here.
Hi, everyone. Let me just get this
Sure thing.
set up. Oop, that's what I wanted to do. Okay, sorry. All right. Good evening, everyone. Sorry about that. I'm really excited. I really love this time of year to be able to come to you with the updates and some of the kind of changes in our program of studies and really just new classes and being able to really be able to start to really utilize this building as it was designed. And so I'm really excited to share with you kind of some of the upcoming things for the program of studies for next year, and to be able to kind of give you just some overview. So as always, I just want to thank the department leaders throughout the school for their collaboration, their work with their content areas, their really thorough review. We spend a lot of time really reviewing what we offer and classes that just have not run, and really just making sure the fact that we are really providing a really comprehensive, engaging, and really diverse kind of experience. And they really have done a nice job of really making sure the fact through our state standards and all the fact that all of our programs from the core areas to all of our electives that we're in good form. Also to Mr. Sean Siciliano, because he really has been instrumental in a huge redesign of our presentation of our program of studies. And of course to the school counseling department, who really are instrumental in making sure our scope and sequence of our programs and all of that are in good form as well. As always, we have a guiding question that we do everything with at the high school, and this is a guiding question that we come back to at the beginning of every year. How can Middleborough High School provide instructional resources and personalized instruction that will allow all students to acquire and hone, demonstrate, and transfer the skills they need in order to be college and career ready? And so that just becomes really the kind of mantra of everything that we do as we are reviewing and we're looking at what we do each and every day. And also, just as always, as part of our school and as part of our program of studies, is really the continuance of our district improvement plan, of really ensuring the fact that we foster a culture of achievement and innovation, a culture of excellence, and a culture of well-being. Also, our school-wide learning expectations are part of the entire process, and that is really an instrumental part of our school, is really as these expectations is what is woven through all that we do. And I want to give a caveat to this, because this has been expectations that you've seen for some time. because these have been the adopted expectations that we have been fostering and kind of evaluating each year. But as we begin our accreditation process very, very shortly, that this will become a change document soon. So it's kind of exciting of really where we are as a high school as we begin our process of preparing for the year 2025, which will be the year that will be accredited once again. Our community service requirement is still in place, and I think it's an important element, and I will tell you that the staff who have put together really the tenets of really what the CSL of our community service learning expectations are, but then really Susan McGurk, who is the coordinator of all of our service learning. So she organizes it all and she documents it and ensures the fact it's an easy way for students to be able to kind of log their hours to make sure the fact that they can meet the expectation. And that is something we'll be continuing with the class of 2026 as they move forward. Obviously, with our criteria for graduation and college entrance, it's really looking at the 136 credits towards graduation and also really making sure the fact we will continue for the 2022-23 school year of really looking at a full-year requirement for math. And now I say that with a caveat because, as you know, the fact that the Board of Higher Education about 4 years ago had made a requirement that every senior needed to show on their transcript that they were taking a math in grade 12. In our high school, is probably as well as mostly all the others, that it was a 3-year requirement for math. What we decided to do is not make it a 4-year requirement. So as I'm kind of contradicting myself a little bit. But the reason why that we make it a 4-year requirement is we want to make sure the fact that any student in our school, senior, who has any indication, thought potentially, that they're going on to college after graduation, that they have to make sure they're enrolled in a 12th grade math. And so what we do is we go down the road and say that we are going to make sure everyone is scheduled for a math. And then we work with students who make it very clear that that is not their plan. And then we work with them to, in order to graduate, they're still maintaining the 3-year requirement. This program of studies this year is really a reflective document of the wonderful learning opportunities that Middleborough High School provides. And many of the new course offerings are really in direct relation to the new high school, which we're really quite excited by. And that really, one of the things that you'll notice is the complete redesign. When I transitioned into the principalship 10 years ago, one of the key things we needed to look at is our program of studies, because years ago, our program of studies was really just, it really did not really present of really the wonderful things that our school had to offer. And so 10 years ago, the document that we have been using translated into about 150 pages of our program of studies. And that worked for us for quite some time. And that with our new building, and especially with kind of the advancement of our website and the use of technology, that we really wanted to make sure the fact that we could have a really current document that really was reflective of really the needs, but also the opportunities of a school. So we went from this massive document that's 150 pages, and we really redesigned it to a really much more appropriate document of about 50. In this new program of studies, is accessible and manageable and easier for our students and our families. As much as our families used to love some of the designs in the program of studies and some of the personalization, well, we oftentimes heard it was incredibly overwhelming. And so we wanted to make sure that it was a document that really was a much easier document for students and families. Also, the engagement of our school website will allow the program of studies to be navigated by a search menu, by content areas and search numbers. So when our students decide they're ready to start scheduling, they can go in and say, I want to see what the history classes are. So they can just click on the drop down for history, and all of the history courses that are available to them will appear. Really is a one-stop shopping. Also, the entire engagement of the program of studies is user-friendly, ADA compliant, and accessible to all. And also with the new document, because we're utilizing Google, that it can be easily translated for any member of our school community into their preferred language. So to give you just some of the elements of our program of studies this year. So in English, we've done a huge review in all areas. You're going to see in every slide that's coming up is that we've done updating of course descriptions, modifications, and made in the scope and the sequence within the curriculum. And the reasoning for that is that because with COVID and really with what we experienced last year with the hybrid learning, we needed to make sure the fact that we all got together in our content areas to make sure we were looking at our scope and sequence. Was there units of last year that we were not able to get to in, say, 9th grade that we needed to make sure we embedded into 10th grade, or vice versa? If our 9th graders that are here at the high school now, was there anything in 8th grade that we needed to make sure was kind of implemented in grade 9? So that has been something universal that has been done. But one of the things that we did is we really did a review of courses that have really been offered, but they were never running, and we haven't run them in years. And so it really became an opportunity to really do a cleaning up of the document. You'll notice the fact that for the English department, the elective literature of diversity has been removed for 2022-23. It is the class that has never run. And what I mean by that is that our schedule is student-driven, which means the fact when our students begin the scheduling process, that they begin in the process of doing it in a way that really their foot traffic decides really what programs run, especially programs outside of the core content areas, their math, their English, their history, their science. So really our electives program is really built based upon where student interest lies. The new courses for this year, there are 4 electives that we'd like to present. One is called the bestseller. And that one in particular is really just an opportunity for students will discover what makes current bestsellers popular, analyzing current culture and literature through modern, relevant lens, and students will be able to participate in discussions on current topics. The reader's journey, which I love, is the fact that students would be able to choose books and go on a journey of literature, of literary fulfillment. On this journey, they'll be able to experience the power of choice in creative writing. It's really about almost imagining students come in and they can choose a novel from the library that really is an interest to them, and to be able to have a class period where they're having discussions about their own personal choices of what they would like to see. And then also the art of personal storytelling is really just one of the electives that English would like to run, of really looking at the learn to narrate and celebrate their own stories through the art of storytelling. And really be looking at maybe important people in their lives and the stories that maybe their grandparents have told. And really, how does that story share itself in terms of the creativeness of really that story? And our last elective, which would be a grade 10 to 12 elective, is an elective called Civil Disobedience, which would be looking at really civil rights movements around the world, looking at people like Gandhi and Martin Luther King Jr., and to really allow upperclassmen to be able to look at really, well, what does the civil rights movement look like? How does one start? And really looking at it from a historical, but also a literary lens. In mathematics, there are no changes besides the major curriculum updates that need to be done, especially with the scope and sequence between 8 and 9, 9 and 10, and 10 and 11 in particular. In history and social studies, there are 2 electives that have been on the books for quite some time that just have not run. The America in the 1960s course has not run in years. And we had started a course, or tried to start a course years ago, called the U.S. Constitution Critical Analysis, Debate, and Oration. It was really going to be a debate class. And I will tell you, every year we've run it, it's never run because no one has signed up for it. So we decided the fact of how can we make sure the fact that the topics that were discussed in that class potentially are woven into our civics and government class, in our U.S. history program, and of course our law program as well. We're excited about our interdisciplinary programming. Because of this new building and the way the building is designed, we have some really cool opportunities to really engage in one of our goals, which is really being much more interdisciplinary in our approach. And that working with the history department and the English department, we've created an elective called Topics in Humanities. And it will be a collaborative course that will be taught between our one of our history teachers, Mr. Smith, and one of our English teachers, Ms. Connor. And really what they will be doing is look at things thematically. And the goal would be that this will be a course that would run each and every year with a different topic or a different lens. So this particular year, their topic they want to look at is war and conflict. And to be able to look at really from a thematic approach is really how does a country or how does a nation become at war? How do conflicts begin? And to really look at it from the lens of 2 different content areas with really 2 different lenses to be able to bring students together. So we're pretty excited by that opportunity. Also, as an advancement on our Project Lead the Way program, we're really excited to announce that we'd love to be able to run our aerospace engineering program, which will become a tenant or kind of an offshoot of our engineering program. It will be offered in 11th grade so that students who are in the engineering pathway and they complete 2 years would be able to add in an additional opportunity through aerospace engineering. And we're really looking forward to that opportunity as well. Also, you just noticed the fact that we're maintaining all of our Project Lead the Way programs. We're incredibly fortunate to be able to maintain all of those. And now all 4 of the programs, so all of the text in white, are all the programs we're now offering. So for the last couple of years, every year I would come in and there would be programs that we were not running because it's a successful program. And now the fact that with our class of 2022, they are the first year to will complete either the full pathway of biomedical science or the full pathway of engineering. And then, of course, our computer science pathway as well of computer science essentials, our advanced placement program, as well as cybersecurity. Also, one of the things we're really excited by is our career technical education. This is going to be something that Mr. Cupey, who is our coordinator of the innovation lab here at the high school, he and I have been really working a lot of really beginning to figure out, well, what does the future of this space look like of our innovation lab? And Mr. Cupey in particular has done an outstanding job of really the beginnings of creating a 5-year trajectory of really what does this will look like over time. But to be able to begin to take the step that we're really excited to launch our introduction to innovation and applied technology. So it's really going to be a grades 9 through 12 elective for any student who would like to have an entry point in really what would that innovation lab be. It's a 2.5 credit elective. It'd be open to any student. And that it's really an opportunity for us to be able to get this lab going and to be able to have them experience all of the machinery, all of the materials, and really the power of innovation in that lab. So we're excited for that. Also in world languages, you see that we're removing some courses. And one was an experiment that we thought was going to be fabulous, and it wasn't. And we realized the fact that we needed to kind of move away from it. One of them is the American Sign Language program. We run this program virtually. We have a really vibrant online learning academy that we actually were using mostly for credit recovery. And then we realized the opportunities that we had, especially last year during the hybrid model, where we were really utilizing a lot of our online learning academy. One of the most popular courses last year was the American Sign Language class. And so we decided to do an experiment where we would actually run the class from a virtual lens, but actually have it in a classroom with all the other students that were doing it. And that albeit the fact that it was a filled class, we found that it was really a challenging experience because the way the class runs, everything is self-paced. And so we decided the fact that students could still take American Sign Language. They would just take it as a separate individualized course in an elective potentially, rather than have them assigned to the same period in the day as everyone else. And the other course that we have removed for the time being is Spanish 5, which is our advanced placement. We have such a very, very tiny amount of students who would ever even be eligible for Spanish 5 that it's not even a program that we could even physically run. And that when our students enter high school is when they have their first experience to a world language. And so by the time they reach Spanish 4, they're not even eligible to go into that advanced placement world, and we wouldn't even have a student do that because they would not be set up for success. So for the very small number of students who may be in Spanish 4 in particular during their junior year, for those students, our world language department does something with them if they would like to continue in more of a directed study model where they work independently with the teacher. So that is a program that we're going to be shelving for a period of time. And hopefully someday that it would be something where we would be able to, if you offer world language earlier in a student's experience and not as they start 9th grade, then those higher level languages is something that could easily be attained. In the arts, one of the electives we're moving on from is Beyond the Selfie. So with so many electives in the visual arts that it was just an elective that really was not really taking. So that was the one that we decided to move on from. In theater, one of the things you find, as we know, and you've heard this over the last year and a half, is really the impact that COVID has had on the arts. And so what we've done in theater, to a testament of Mrs. Duggan, the Fine Arts Department Chair, and the theater teacher here, is really looking at really how do we engage students in the trajectory of theater. As you know, that our program is a 4-year pathway, where they start with the intro to theater, Theater 1, Theater 2, and in senior year, they go into Theater 3. Because of how the year went last year, that our theater, that senior year theater, that Theater 3, there just isn't any students that would even take it. So what we decided to do is kind of really think outside the box and create a course called Theater Lab. What it really is going to allow students to do is to be able to have a real sampling of so many different aspects of theater, from design to screenwriting to looking at set design. So it's really going to allow them to have more of an overview of all different aspects of theater rather than just simply just the Theater 3, which would be in really a course that we could not run. And then also the play production, we're eliminating that because it will be absorbed into that Theater Lab program. In music, everything in music is still running with the exception of an elective that we started to run a few years ago that, again, it just never ran, and it's the music history and literature course. In the television production program, this is where Mr. Pelletier, because of the new studio and the ability to have a lot more students engaged in TV production, that really right now we're in the process of beginning the transition of really taking the TV Pro program that was TV Pro 1, 2, 3, and 4, and really beginning the process of looking at really how can you create all these different entry points. And you're going to notice the fact that we are going to be eliminating what is called TV Production 4. But the class itself isn't going to be eliminated. It's actually just the name. That Mr. Pelletier wants to create what is called a digital filmmaking class, that because of the capabilities in the TV studio as well as the TV production classroom, it would allow for a really kind of dive into a very different look at media. And really, it would allow students who finish TV production 2 that would be able to go into the digital filmmaking class. So this is the beginning of that evolution of the changes that Mr. Pelletier envisions over time. In physical education, the one class that we're removing, again, it's being shelved for now, is called Project Adventure. This class was added because it was anticipated when we were building this building that we were able to put in a ropes course, if you remember, in the gym in the ceiling as well as a rock climbing wall. That was not able to be done because of the design of that gym at the time. That is not something that we can do later on in years to come, but we didn't want to run a course that we knew that was just not in the capacity to do it. And so that is a course that we decided to put on the back burner for now. Also in our early college programming, we're still creating that, we still have maintaining that partnership with Massasoit Community College. The only change, and this is really just out of really trends that we've seen, a few years ago we came to you and said we were going to be offering early college to grade 10. What we found is that we have very few 10th graders who can actually engage in early college because of what their comprehensive requirements are in grade 10 in their cores. On top of that, we have found that for students in grade 10 who tried to engage in the early college, that many of them have not found success. So after a lot of conversations after the last many months, we decided that we would go back to what has been the traditional entry point for early college, which is beginning with the grade 11. So it would be open to all juniors and seniors that would go into the Jim Braga Pathway to Business, the early childhood program, the school to career partnerships, which is really happening in grade 12, and of course, criminal justice. What's next? Really, hopefully after the approval tonight, we begin the process of mobilizing scheduling. So we would begin the process in early February. It is a student-driven schedule, so we would open the portals through Aspen where students and their families could choose the classes that they want to take next year. We would then our school counselors would be working with the 8th graders down at the middle school to be able to have, one, a connection. I am your school counselor when you come to the high school, but two, to be able to get them going on what a 9th grade experience looks like. We're scheduling a program of studies night that would happen on February 2nd, which would invite all of the 8th grade families to the high school to really learn about what happens in the 9th grade, also to be able to see the building, to meet staff, and to be able to learn about the opportunities that Middleborough High School has. And then really, we'd be working with the grades 9 through 11 students during the month of February, helping them to be able to design a schedule. It's important to note, just as I know that for many of the upperclassmen families that are here, that when we were last year or in years past, our schedule was always done by the end of June. So when students left at the end of the school year, they had a schedule. That was not so easy to do last year. So being able to go back to our scheduling process starting in late January, it will allow for us to be able to meet our goals by having every student walk out of our school when they leave for summer vacation with their schedule. So I appreciate your consideration, and I can take any questions you may have.
My first question is, well, not on the program of studies, I think is related to the program of studies. And that is, where do we stand on our scheduling committee?
So I think your question was, and I'm sorry, Mr., about the schedule, right? So we have a committee that has been working every week since the middle of October on really looking at a new design for the master schedule at the high school. And we're kind of getting down to some options that we're looking at. But we had made it known the fact that this would be the year that is the goal, that by the end of our school year this year, that we would have an opportunity of a new schedule to share with you and to share with the community. And then we would do in the 2022-23 school year is to actually do all the building of it, because there's a significant amount of work that has to be done in order to launch a new schedule in Aspen, the entire recreation to make sure the fact that graduation credits are in order and that nothing screws it up for a student. And so what we would end up doing is this would be the year of design, next year would be the year of the implementation, and the launch would be in the 23-24 school year. At least that is the goal, Mr. Young. So.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chair.
Other questions about the program?
Yes, thank you. Regarding the foreign languages program, you mentioned, how nice it would be to have it at the middle school at some point. So my question is sort of twofold. What are the barriers to getting that? And has this been a conversation with you and Mrs. Latender as far as, perhaps a high school teacher doing part-time down there? I don't know what that even looks like, but I'm just curious, has this been discussed and what it looks like?
Thank you, Mrs. Farley. I think there hasn't really been any really formal conversations, but what I think we've been able to do really well in Middleborough is to provide some opportunity of exposure at the middle level. And I think what has happened is that with the redesign of the state standards in world language, number one, that has become a very, very different looking world language program at the high school level. So that became, those state standards in world language had been really stagnant or really hasn't changed in many, many years. It is now all changed. And so what has happened is it has become much more about immersion of the language, that students are utilizing the language in the language that they're learning in speaking and starting in the level 1 program. And so one of the things that we're noticing is the fact that at some point it would be something that we should look at is really looking at if you could expand that program into the lower grades. It allows for students to get to the high school that they're not being exposed to the language for the first time. Right. And that really becomes part of that. There's also one of the things that we have really done a lot of work, and I have to give Sean Kinney, the department chair in world language, a lot of credit in his team, is that the state offers what is called a seal of biliteracy that allows for a student to get kind of a credential of really their ability for fluency in a multi-language. And the fact that one of the challenges that we have is because of the fact when students start in 9th grade, that it almost creates a roadblock for them to be able to do that. And so what we have been working on is how can we find ways of getting students the ability to do that with the current structure that we have. But we know the fact that for many of the school districts that have been able to engage the seal of biliteracy, which is a significant amount of work, that many of these school districts have a program that is beyond, that starts earlier than grade 9. Right. I hope I answered that for you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Other questions? Rich, go ahead.
Sure. Thank you very much for the presentation. I love what you mentioned in the beginning about how it's going to be on the website and in kind of a searchable form. That sounds like a great improvement. Probably not easy to do, so thank you. I think you already answered my question about the removal of the America in the 1960s and the U.S. Constitution. It sounds like those topics exist elsewhere in the coursework. I think I heard you say U.S. government and politics is probably the place where those things fall. Right. So that's great. The question I had was about the music theory and literature. Yep. So I think I heard you say music theory. Was it? It
was music history.
Music history. Yeah. Okay. So the AP music theory is still there.
Yep.
Okay. Great.
Yep. Yep. That America in the 1960s course that Mr. Oakley, I'll explain. When I was the department chair in history, we created that course because at the time there was a real kind of energy around really very topical time periods, that you would take a time period of history and you'd really dive deep into that time period. And because the 1960s is just such a kind of exciting time period in American history and a really pivotal one, that was why we created that course. And for many, many years, that course ran every semester. But I think just over time, with so many other opportunities that were coming for students at the high school and growing of more electives and new electives and all of that, that was just a class that just students weren't taking any longer. And the other one was really created as a debate class. We were really trying to figure out a way of creating a debate class, and the teacher who wanted to run it, we thought that would be the angle and the focus in order to do that. And I will tell you, every year we have tried to run it, it has never run. So it just became something, we were having programming in a program of studies that just no one was ever signing up for. And then how could we make sure the fact that either topics and things like that are being offered in another venue within the program? And we know that. But that particular class in particular was really created as really the underpinnings of a debate class kind of thing. So if that helps with that.
Excellent, yeah, thank you.
Actually, Mr. Pistole actually chimed in on the chat. He said, music history and literature has been absorbed by another course, impact the role of music in society.
Right. Yep. That music history and literature, Mr. Stevens, was just an elective that we had created when Mr. Pitsley, in particular, had done a really big overview or overhaul, of really broadening the music program. And the fact that that was just a class that is just never really kind of took hold as many others, like the impact class. The sound engineering class that you approved a year ago, that class is running for the first time next week, and it is full to the brim with kids. So I think it just became something where we're looking at the courses that we know are running, but then also looking at courses that we just had in a program of studies that we were just kind of, try it again and let's see. And it just was never getting the foot traffic. But now what happens is each and every year we go back to the drawing board. So when once this program of studies is engaged and we begin the scheduling process, we begin the whole process again in the summer and into the fall of really, all right, folks, let's do the dive again and let's see kind of, is there an entry point we need to add? Is there something we need to be doing again? And maybe courses would come back again because there's that foot traffic that's saying, let's maybe review that again.
Thank you.
And I just have one, just a clarification. You had mentioned something about the American Sign Language class. It is still available, but there was a different way that you have to go about taking it. Is that right?
So our students can still access the Online Learning Academy. We do it more sparingly because we really, after last year, there was so much online that we really wanted to make sure students were sitting in a class with their teacher, But there are the opportunities for kids to have that elective. So we knew the fact by removing it from really a scheduled, locked-in time of their day, that now it became, for a student who really wanted to take American Sign Language, they could certainly.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Other
Just one thing, if I may, there's a new booklet here that it will be interactive, that it gives every content area just an overview of the courses and a hyperlink. So when it goes live, that when the students go into, say, the math department, they can click on the hyperlink. It will take them to the website where it will show them the drop-downs where they can search by department, and then all the math courses will come up. So they can just simply scroll and say, I want to take that math class, I want to do that course. And I think it just may make it a lot easier and a little bit more of an ancillary document for families to be able to navigate. So thanks for your consideration.
Any other question? Anybody in the audience have questions? Seeing none, the chair will entertain a motion to approve the program of study.
So moved.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Discussion. The one piece I want to make clear, and I think is important to the parents out there, especially 8th grade parents looking at this, the program of studies has lots and lots of opportunities for your child. It's really about the lifeblood of a school because it's what opportunities exist there for students. If your child is thinking of going to college, there are a lot of opportunities for them to take AP courses and a lot of opportunities for them to take outside college courses that'll help them later on. In my particular case, my daughter picked up a year of college because of the AP courses she took here and the college courses she was able to take here. So that saved me paying for a year of college. These are opportunities that aren't in other places, and these are opportunities that are very unique here, especially two things. One, the amount of AP courses, Paul, that you offer, and second, that anyone can take an AP course as long as they have the prerequisites to get into the AP course. Some schools don't do that. Some schools only allow a student at a certain level to get into AP courses. So I'll really ask parents to take a look at that list and work with your child to plan out what they want to do. So thank you, Paul. This is
Thank you.
extensive, and thank you to the teachers who are teaching these courses, because they sort of cover virtually everything and anything that anyone would want when they come in here, so I appreciate that.
Great.
So with that, any other further comment or discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? It's unanimous. Thank you, Paul.
Thank you,
Thank you.
everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Brannigan. And on the online version, Mr. Brannigan, is there any way we can get some student artwork in there? That's what I missed this year. Normally in the program of studies, there's a number of artwork that's
There
that's
is.
featured throughout the book. Maybe Sean can put them online somehow.
I can talk to Sean, absolutely. All right, thank you, everyone.
Sean did on this too, because I know it was pretty complex.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, moving on, my report, next up is the school calendar, the sort of the second read, if you will. And there are 3 drafts that were put together and put into your folders, in your drop boxes. And they sort of outline different years. Basically, if you look at the sum of the parts, one of them starts on August 31st and then goes to September 1st for 2 professional development days. Then the kids would start the Friday, then have the Tuesday. The others, both option 1 and option 2, start teacher day, the teacher work week, which we're used to in this district right now, that week before Labor Day, with the teachers coming in 2 days on the 29th and 30th. And then the first day of school being the 31st of August, and then going on from there. So there are some options there. Obviously, traditional vacations are in there. You know, we have a 184-day calendar. We have 4 professional development days. And in each of these calendars, they're outlined. Usually the first 2 are the first 2 days of school. And then we have used, this year we need to use Election Day as a holiday, because we have the high school gymnasium and the middle school gymnasium, which will now be polling places in the town. And so that's our 3rd. And then our 4th is, you can float that around as a district or as a school committee, wherever you decide. And most of these are actually, all 3 of these, it has the Friday before Martin Luther King Day, which we have used traditionally as the 4th day. We have 6 release days that are scattered throughout the year. And so they're before you tonight for your discussion. And I will step aside.
Thoughts? Greg, go ahead.
Yeah, so I guess I like the middle one, the number 2. The first one seems kind of awkward to have just a day or 2 of classes, then a 4-day weekend. I like the number 2 because I think you go 3 days, without that Friday before Labor Day is a school day. And then we finish up on the 16th of June, which I like.
Correct.
The number 3 option, where you start the students after Labor Day, you're finishing school on 6/22. And to me, that's just a little close call, because even though we haven't had many snow days, knock on wood, but some years we get hammered. And I don't want this district to be struggling. So I guess personally, I like number 2.
Mr. Chair?
Other thoughts?
Ms. Farley.
Mr. Chair, I agree. I like option 2 as well, and I did post it on my Facebook page just to get some feedback from the community, and it seems to be option 2 has been pretty popular. I think people do like starting after Labor Day, and it sounds really great, but when you look at June, going into, the last week of June, if you have even 2 or 3 snow days, it's pretty tough to think about that. So I think this is kind of a nice little happy medium of a few days before, but looking at June not being so bad, so.
I guess just make sure I have this correct. The state law is you can't go to school after June 30th.
Correct.
So, is that correct?
No, it's contractual.
Oh, it's contractual, okay. So, still, it's contractual, so I know some schools had to go to Saturday schools to fit their days in, because they ran out of days at the end of June. So, yeah, that's another point, that June 30th is kind of a cutoff for us.
If it came to past June 30th, we'd have to either do Saturdays or we have to take away vacation.
would have to look at April vacation.
Right.
That's just the nature of what.
Yep. Got it.
Other questions or comments? I would point out to everybody that while this is in the form it is in, we are in the middle of a contract negotiation, so I don't know if anything adds to that or subtracts from that. So I just want people to know that up front, that this is, at next meeting, we can make an approval of a calendar, but after we deal with the contract, there could be pieces that make changes to the calendar. So,
And those would affect the, like the half-days, the professional development days, all those can be contractually negotiated.
to be honest with you, anything can be.
Right.
Around a calendar year. While the school committee establishes the calendar, it's based on the parameters in the contract.
And what we're held to right now, Mr. Stevens and committee, is that we have 180 school days solid. We have to have those. And then we have 4 professional development days, full days for faculty. So, and that is, the teaching faculty and the ESP faculty are both on that 4-day schedule. So we do need to account for those 4 days and 180 student days, so.
And one more question regarding Good Friday. I know that that has come up in the past. At times we've not honored it, and at times we have. I don't know if that's been a continued conversation regarding, will we continue to honor it, or is it a year-by-year basis? Because it looks like you are honoring it this year, but I think 2 years ago it wasn't, or maybe last year it was, I don't
It
know.
would be a school committee decision.
So it would be a school committee decision, but I'd say this, for the purpose of discussion, we'd be talking about a Friday at that period, not necessarily Good Friday.
Okay.
If- Other discussion? So we can post these on the website, Brian?
Yeah.
For
Would you
people to
like
have a
them,
chance to take a look at and provide feedback.
would the committee like all 3 posted?
Yeah.
For public discourse? I know that Ms. Farley's social media is fairly popular in the community, but this would be on the website for those that aren't signed on.
No, I think that's great.
Okay.
And then we'll have the vote at the next meeting.
Ms. Hickey, could you remind me tomorrow morning?
Yes.
Please. Thank you. Right, moving on, if there are no questions, or I don't think is there any input from the community? I don't. Is a budget update, Ms. Hickey.
Thank you, Superintendent Lynch, and thank you for having me, school committee members. This is really an exciting time for me and my role. We're into the budget subcommittee process. Budget subcommittee met last night for the first time. We meet with directors and principals next week on the 27th and on the following week on the 31st. And also next week, the governor's budget comes out, and once the governor's budget comes out, then we will get communication from the town manager, and I will have the number that is the budget number that we need to work within as the school district. And so next week, big news for us. And then February 9th and 10th, we have follow-up meetings with anybody that the budget subcommittee, any principal or director of the budget subcommittee wants to have follow-up conversations with, and we still have our budget hearing scheduled for February 17th.
Thank you. Any questions about budget? Does the budget subcommittee wish to say anything?
I just want to thank Sarah. I had asked her for something last night, and I came here today, and it was all set. So, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
And Mr. Chair, the budget subcommittee is Ms. Janess and Ms. Farley, so, as you know. And that concludes my report this evening.
Thank you. Next up on our report is MSBA building project.
Really no updates on that, other than the fact that we're sort of in a winter holding pattern. We did get some additional workers in for the, what turned out to be a little bit of a 4-day weekend, and they're able to work freely in the school and in areas that where we're sanctioned off for the work. So we're still working on a punch list, which has been reduced significantly, and then the exterior work will be done in the spring. Hopefully, a mild winter and we can get going earlier in the spring, so.
Thank you. Any questions about that? Seeing that. Next is the DESI response letter. So as everyone knows, hold on one second. Brought it up on my screen. Just trying to get my... So DESI responded to us on December 10th, 2021. I think we got it a little later than that. I do have the letter on my phone, too. It was a response to our letter in October. So I open it up for discussion.
Mr. Chair.
Sorry, Mom.
I guess I would,
Please go ahead.
I would just say, I was disappointed, publicly I'll say I was disappointed by that response, to refer us back to the August guidelines when we were asking for clarification on the August guidelines just felt a little disingenuous to me. And I'm pleased to see that they're updating some things and making some changes, as Mr. Oakley did allude to earlier, regarding the vaccinated and the non-vaccinated. But I do think that we could have gotten a more comprehensive response. So I was just disappointed by that.
Rich, go ahead.
Yep, Mr. Chair, just to reiterate, I think what we had talked about back when we got the response was there's still that piece floating out there about the 80% vaccination threshold, and the fact that, as far as I know, nothing has changed where if a district hits that, the vaccinated students take off their masks and the unvaccinated students keep them on, which I can't even imagine someone that had any experience in schools came up with that. It just seems ripe for bullying. And so I haven't seen any change or anything there, and so just continue to be disappointed by that decision and hoping that something changes there. Or maybe this thing just runs its course before we even have to talk about that, but that's it.
Thank you. Bridget, did you want to say something? I know you asked to be on, so I just want to give you an opportunity.
I mean, I'm just going to reiterate Teresa's, disappointment in this. This is really not even a well thought out or educated threshold, 80% threshold. Their rationale doesn't make any sense. It's not fact-based. It's not data-based. It's like we did it because Vermont did it. There's nothing in here that talks about any rationale for the 80%, even though they say they have factors that contribute to rationale. So it's clear that DESE is making rules without really a good basis for them, and they can't even come up. Like, if there was some sort of good basis, I would like to hear it. Like, I would like them to explain it to me. A lot of people, when they look at this, they think of herd immunity and thresholds for that, herd immunity thresholds, and this isn't what they're getting at. They're saying they're even misusing some of those terms without saying that a high level of protection against outbreaks of severe disease is achieved once sufficient proportion of the population has some immunity from infection. Well, so that whole sentence is wrong. A high level of protection against disease would require a vaccine to prevent an illness. This doesn't, and it says it right in here that they're saying it prevents an outbreak of severe disease. Well, the outbreak of severe disease or the reduction in severe disease would only be beneficial to the person who takes the vaccine. So you wouldn't reduce severe disease amongst other people. The only person that would benefit from that vaccine is the individual who took it. So the idea of herd immunity protecting others in the community when you reach a certain threshold is not applicable here. And they're trying to twist those words into that. I don't like to compare apples to oranges. I don't like to compare this vaccine to some of the vaccines we've used in the past because they are very, very different types of vaccines, and you cannot compare any one vaccine to another because each one has its own efficacy profile and its own safety profile. But I will point out that every disease that we have reduced its prevalence through the use of vaccines has never been through the exclusive use of vaccines. We've only ever had a mix of natural immunity and vaccine-induced immunity. We've never achieved anything with a full only vaccine-induced antibodies. So what I'm trying to say is that in this whole policy of saying that we need 80% of your students vaccinated to remove a mask, they completely ignore all natural immunity or all students with natural immunity. And historically, when we've always looked at reduction in disease or infection prevalence in a community, it has always included people who have had natural immunity. So I don't want to assume anything from anybody up there, but maybe you're close to my age and maybe you had chickenpox. And so I have never needed a chickenpox vaccine or booster because I had the disease myself, like many of you have had. It's always been a combination, but for some reason, this disease, we're denying natural immunity when we consider who gets to take their masks off. But then you start reading a little bit more, and so while those children are excluded, what they actually use in this is the whole idea that natural immunity contributes to this whole prevalence, and that they actually link you to a study that says that natural immunity is actually more protective than vaccine-induced immunity. And even since we got this letter, we are seeing that the vaccine is waning more, and it's less effective against the variants that are changing. So at this point in time, the vaccine is not our way out of this. As we're seeing, I don't know if you've seen some of the new studies that came out, but they're showing that people who have 2 doses of this vaccine actually have a negative efficacy against the Omicron variants, which I didn't even know that was a thing, but it is. A negative efficacy, meaning they are 40% more likely to contract Omicron, which seems what we're seeing, many vaccinated people getting sick with COVID because there's, I don't know, I don't understand all of that. I'm sure they'll figure that out eventually, what the interference is with this vaccine and this new strain. But again, this whole threshold, this whole policy, my whole take on this is they don't know what they're doing. They're throwing something out there. And again, as I've said from the beginning, this had nothing to do with data, this had nothing to do with safety, this had nothing to do with health, this had everything to do with pushing vaccines on our students. And I don't think that coercion is an effective way to try to induce something to happen. So every health decision needs to be based for that person on their personal experience, professional experience, health history. It needs to be an individual decision without coercion. One of the nice things that I've seen in this community is I've seen nothing from the school that has pushed, coerced, talked to my children, sent any information home, no introduction of vaccine clinics. So Middleborough has done a really phenomenal job of leaving those decisions in the parents' hands and in their consultation with their chosen health provider. So that's been phenomenal with this community. We see in other communities that's not what's happening. But that being said, we're not approaching the 80% mark. This doesn't make any sense, so I think we can, I don't know, maybe some of you find that whatever DESE sent to us makes sense. I don't think it does. How are we off-ramping this? They keep talking about off-ramping. How are we getting these kids out of masks? I mean, I'm very glad to hear that that student who was so severely ill with COVID is making a recovery, and it sounds like she had such a severe case that this is going to be a long recovery for her, and I'm glad she was able to get the right care, and she's doing well now and improving. So that's great to hear. And while I appreciate your bringing that to us, Mr. Oakley, I think the important thing is we cannot hyper-focus on one disease and saying that, well, how many children do we lose or do we have this happen to? Because we cannot ignore everything else and all the other harms that are happening to our children. So there is a mental health crisis amongst our children. How many children have to suffer mental health crises? Suicide ideation is up 50% in girls right now since this crisis happened. We are seeing, I mean, across the board, anxiety, outreach for this. There's all sorts of talk I hear everywhere from the government, from our legislature about the mental health crisis, but nobody is doing the thing to remove what's causing the mental health crisis. So we want to put in more counselors. Well, that's not removing the thing that's happening. If you have a knife wound, you need to take the knife out. So you can't start healing until the knife is removed. We can't start healing our children until we start pulling back these measures. So I know, I've personally dealt with suicide within my own family and friend group. Other people have dealt with that. These are very personal issues. So to say how many children, I don't want to lose any children to COVID. I also don't want to lose any children to suicide. And I also don't want to see any more children suffer from the consequences of what's going on here. So we cannot continue to hyper-focus on this. We have to figure out how do we get out of this and how do we start switching to choice? Because once we switch to choice, everybody who wants to continue to do that, they can continue to wear a mask, and that's fine. And everybody who doesn't feel that that measure is healthy or appropriate for their child can remove it.
Other thoughts or comments? Seeing no one, I will move on. Consent agenda. Chair will entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda.
So moved.
Do I hear a second? Do I hear a second? Discussion?
So I wasn't here, so I'm just going to abstain, okay, for both those.
No
meetings.
problem. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? It's unanimous. Next up on our agenda, are action
Excuse me.
items.
I asked you to hold on a minute.
What was that?
I asked you to hold on a minute when I was coming down the stairs.
Okay, I didn't hear you, sorry.
It's okay. I think Bridget asked, what are we going to do now? And there was no answer from anybody up there. So where do we go from here?
Well, unfortunately, masks are a requirement of the state. So that's the answer. So I would suggest you have conversations with the state.
So when you guys applied for the ESSER funds,
Yep.
what were the requirements to get that money?
There was a grant. We were provided,
And did it come with stipulations?
it came with an application form that we had to fill out.
Yes. And what did that application form say?
The application form for the ESSER grant was a spreadsheet that was about 12 pages long. I can't, off the top of my head, tell you what it said right now.
Do you have to agree to follow DESI guidelines regardless in order to get the money?
The ESSER money comes from the U.S. Treasury.
Okay,
DESI is what's called a pass-through organization.
okay.
And so the money comes from the federal government through the Department of Ed to the Middleborough Public Schools.
But it can't be free. I mean, there must be something that you as a district have to do in order to receive those funds.
We have to follow the guidelines for using federal grants.
So does that mean you're not allowed as a school board to question DESI's guidance? Or to push back or say that you're not going to do
We
something?
sent Desi a letter and got a response.
You sent DESI a letter.
Yeah.
None of us are happy with it.
Okay.
So that's that. We say, okay, well, we sent DESI a letter, so let's move on. What was the point of sending the letter?
I don't have an answer for you.
You need to have an answer. You're so passive when it comes to this. You just don't even want to be bothered. I don't get it.
I don't know what you're talking about, but that's okay.
I know, I'm sure you don't. I think that you as a school board need to do a little bit more and pursue this and push back a little harder.
Thank you. We're on
Out-of-state field trip.
Out-of-state field trip. The out-of-state field trip is to Roger Williams. It requires a vote of the school committee because it's out of state. Chair will entertain a motion to approve the field trip.
So moved.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Discussion?
I'm just curious about the, for field trips out of state, right now, the COVID, obviously, there's, I think Rhode Island has more restrictions than we do. Who would look at the restrictions in the state and the out-of-state? Because I think that everything's going to change by June. Hopefully, it's an outdoor field trip and should be no problem. But who, like, if we approve the field trip, but who approves it based on what's changing?
The principal along with me, Mr. Stevens. So the principals know that they need to get updates continually from anywhere we're going for their guidelines and their determinations on what they require.
Okay, thank you.
Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? It's unanimous. Also on our agenda was the donation from Life Touch Studios to Mary Kay Good. And last on our agenda.
sorry, Mr. Chair.
Chair will entertain a motion to go into executive session for 2 reasons. Procedure 3, to discuss strategy with respect to collective bargaining or litigation. If an open meeting may have detrimental effect on the bargaining or litigation position of the public body, and the chair so declares, I so declare, for the teacher's contract. And secondly, procedure 7, to comply with and act under authority or general special law or federal grant aid and requirements. And this is executive session minutes. This is where this falls.
Sorry, I just tried to sneak a question in there at the end about the donation. I just
Sorry.
wondered if, it's okay, I just wondered if maybe you or Superintendent Lynch could explain a little bit more about what that donation is, and it seems like a very generous donation.
Basically, that donation is a percentage of the money that Life Touch profits from the Life Touch pictures. So they turn it back to the school.
Excellent. Is that something that they do all the time? or-
Yes.
Okay,
Part of the contract.
thank you.
So Chair, entertain a motion to go into executive session for those 2 reasons.
So moved.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
As purpose of discussion, we will not come back other than to adjourn. This requires a roll call vote. Ms. Farley?
Aye.
Mr. Ness?
Aye.
Mr. Stevens?
Aye.
Mr. Oakley?
Aye.
And the chair votes aye. Thank you, and we'll see you in 2 weeks.